So guys, we're continuing in our series for the one, and I have a message today titled, The Power of Reaching the One. The Power of Reaching the One. How many of you have ever been lost? Anybody ever been lost? Yes, there's hands all over this place. You know, I kind of grew up in an area that was a little bit hood, okay? Do I got any people that grew up in the hood a little bit? And there's something it's different. You know, there was a day, believe it or not, young people, that we didn't have cell phones with GPS on them, okay? We had this thing called a Thomas guide. Or if you were in the hood, you had some dude at the gas station that when you needed directions, you came up and said, hey, how do I get here? And I'm going to tell you, if he said, hey, what you want to do is, if he says it that way, if what you want to do is, just run. Because he's about to give you the most crazy directions. He's going to be like, yeah, go down the street, and there's going to be this car that only has 3 wheels, and there's going to be this girl there, and she has like a stroller sitting there, and what you want to do is and you're just like, no, just run. But hey, we have all experienced that, right? Being lost, trying to figure out, how do I navigate through these waters? I've never been here before. But even in the practical sense, some of us have been lost, even as children, How many of you guys remember Zodies? You guys remember Zodies? Come on, Price Club, am I taking it back? You guys remember those stories? Montgomery Wards, being at the mall. How many of you ever got lost at Disneyland? Or maybe you were that kid at Stater Brothers. Could somebody come up here to the front and please get Joe? There's a Joe up here. Any mom, dad want to claim this kid? He's really dirty. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just messing around. But you guys know what I'm talking about. We all know what it's like to be lost. I was looking at, I typed in, I Googled who, the person that's been lost the longest. And there's this guy, he's not a household name, but he holds the record for being lost. His name is Jose Salvador Alvaranga. Woo, that's a name. Well, he was lost. He was a fisherman from Mexico, and he was lost for 438 days at sea. He drifted for almost 7,000 miles over this 14-month period. What a crazy thought. Can you imagine being lost that long? And the thing that's interesting is that throughout history, people have been lost in jungles, right? They've been lost in deserts. They've been lost in all kinds of different situations. And we all know what that feels like to be lost. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is going after the lost. And see, this guy, Jose, as he was, out there adrift at sea, there's something that happens when somebody is lost. See, it doesn't matter when you're lost how much money you have. It doesn't matter, who you know. It doesn't matter how great you are. It doesn't matter what dreams you have. None of that matters. Because when somebody is lost, what happens is your single focus becomes trying to get control of your life again. Your single focus begins trying to get control of that situation again. And see, I'm just here to tell you today that being lost without Christ, there is no worse way to be lost. That is the true definition of being lost, is not having God in your life. And this is why, because when the Bible refers to people being lost, this is what it really means, is that those people are disconnected from reality. See, many times we think to ourselves like, yeah, these people are so disconnected from reality. Man, they're on this like drug trip or whatever. But I'm going to tell you this, to be disconnected from God, you are disconnected from reality. See, Jose out there adrift, him trying to survive was his reality. Him trying to fish and trying to get, something to eat every day, trying to find a way to collect fresh water every day. That was his reality. His reality was very small. His reality was very confined. And he had no hope for the future after a while because nobody came to rescue him. He was lost. That was his reality. But think about this. There was a whole nother reality that was going on around him. See, back at home, people were still having birthday parties. People were eating good food. People were drinking water. People were still getting married. People were still having children. See, there was a whole different reality that was good that was going on, but he was not part of it. Why? Because he was lost. And it's the same thing that I want to tell you today, that people that are adrift without a relationship with God, you're living in your reality of addiction. You're living in your reality of lust. You're living in your reality of dysfunction. You're living in your reality of poverty. You're living in this reality, but I want you to know today that with God, there is a whole different reality out there. Amen? That there is a reality that there is a God that loves you. There's a reality that there is a God that wants to prosper you. There's a God that wants to heal you. That there's a God that wants to protect you. That there's a God that has hope for you. That he has something great ahead in store for you. That is the reality. But see, Hosea drift, what he needed in order for his reality to change is he needed somebody to find him. And I believe that today it's the same thing when we talk about going after the one, the power of finding the one, the power of hunting down the one. This is the reality, is that if we can get to them and connect them to the one that can change their life, a whole new reality opens up. Are you guys getting this morning? This is the importance of having a church that goes after the one. It grieves my heart that the American church, and I'm just going to indict us because this is our country, that we've been caught up with other things instead of going after the Hoseas, the people that are adrift, the people that are out there all alone, desperately wondering if anybody cares, desperately wondering if this could be the day that their life can change because they're not sure that they can go on one more day. And think about the glorious day that when you are adrift and you are lost and you hear that helicopter or you put up those smoke signals and somebody came to get you. It shows that you mattered all along. And church, that is our mandate. That is our job. That is what we've been called to do. That God has set us free. He's healed us. He's restored us. He's imparted gifts to us. He's empowered us to go on a search party, to get out there and find the lost, those who are adrift that are saying, I'm not sure I can make it one more day. And so today I'm going to talk to you about 3 kinds of lost people that we need to go after. And we're going to go to Luke chapter 15. So if you have a Bible, you can go there today. If you have a Bible app, you can go there as well, or we have it on the screens for you. But we're going to work through this chapter of Luke chapter 15 where it talks a whole lot about lost people. It talks about not only people being lost, though, it talks about people being found. So in Luke 15, 3 through 7, if we have that, or actually 4, here we go. It says, what man of you having 100 sheep, if he has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after? Would you guys say that with me? Go after the one that is lost until he finds it. Do you guys see the mindset? That I'm not going to just go. I mean, like my son, I love my son, but he was the type that if we asked him to go find anything, he was like, oh, I couldn't find it. And my daughter, she was the opposite, man. She's in there just digging stuff and, flipping beds over, just looking for things. Guys, that's the mindset that we have to have, is that we go after the one that is lost until he finds it, until we find it. And it says, and when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. I love that because this is talking about, it's really a typology of Christ finding us, that he lifts us on his shoulders, which takes the weight off of our heavy burden and legs. Come on. Let's continue in 6. It says, and when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost. What a beautiful image. But as we see in the Bible, it talks about people being lost. And again, what are lost people? They're people that are disconnected from the reality of God, the reality of his plan and purpose for their life. And so we have 3 kinds of sheep that we're going to talk about today. One is the lost sheep, okay? So we're going to go to this, the lost sheep, those who are wandering. See, the people who are wandering are people who know God. And if you've been at Hub City, I don't pet people, I pastor you, and I'm going to tell you the truth. The wanderers are the people that have this kind of mindset. You know what? I'm just a little tired today. I'll go to church next week. And then 1 week turns into 2 weeks, right? Because something came up, Tia Concha's birthday party or something. We got to go over there. It's at 3 o'clock and church at 9, but man, I got to make sure my hair's right, for that party. And then 2 weeks, 3 weeks turns into a month. The next thing you know, you've adopted other kind of habits and you feel like you've wandered from God. And I want you to know that you're lost. But God's eye is still on you. See, I have some real footage of my own life. I wanted to share with you guys if I can. You guys want some footage of my own life, my wandering? Could I get the? Okay, here we go. This is my. Can we get the sound on that? Lord, deliver me. Yeah, this was me in high school right here. You guys know anybody like that? Come on. Were any of you that person? Come on, man. Some of you guys got some height on that jump, man, right back into the same ditch. And see, that's what wandering does, is often wandering is we live life like that God has delivered you, he has set you free, and we find ourselves wandering back to where we came from. He pulled you out of the mud. He set you in this place where you're on green pastures, and we find ourselves back in the mud. And I just want you to know that if you know people like that, a couple weeks ago we had prayer cards. Those people should be on that list. Those wanderers, you should have been praying for them the last couple weeks, and we'll continue to pray for them this week, that God will draw them home, and that for Easter, that some of them are going to get pulled out of that ditch once again. And this time, we're going to walk to the green pastures instead of back to the mud. Amen? So we need to go after those lost sheep. We need to bring back those who have been wandering. Because here's the thing, is that even though we get frustrated, and one of the things that's really hilarious in that video, the first one when the sheep walks back, the guy just does this. He throws his hands up and he just walks like, oh, well, good luck, man. You know, and some of us, that's what we want to do. That's what we want to do. When we have a loved one that consistently goes back to what they were doing before, and we want to just kind of throw our hands up like, you know what? But thank God that God doesn't give up on us. Thank God that when we make mistakes that he welcomes us back and he loves on us and doesn't make it feel awkward and weird. And as believers, that has got to be our mission. Yeah. That has got to be how we do life, is that we go after them. Why? Because they're precious people, because they're precious to him, and they need to be precious to us. Amen? Yes. So I want to look at another type of lost person. We see this in Luke chapter 15, once again in verse 8, if I can get that up on the screens. It says, so there's this story, okay? And you got to remember, in this whole thing, the Pharisees are jamming Jesus up because he's hanging out with sinners. Or let's say he's hanging out with lost people. And they're not really appreciating it too much. And that's why he's telling this story. He's saying, hey, listen, like, why am I going to celebrate the people who are already saved? I'm going to celebrate the ones who came back. And here's yet another story. It says, or what woman having 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, does not light a lamp and sweep the house and seek diligently until she finds it? Let's continue with 9 and 10. It says, and when she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I had lost. Just so, I tell you, there is joy before the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Are you guys seeing the common theme? That Jesus, he keeps telling these different stories, these different parables, but it's the same thing. It's about going after lost people. And see, here's the thing, is that we look at this story and go, you know what? Big deal, she lost a coin. Don't we all have coins, right? And that brings us to this second person. I'm going to explain this. So if I can get my next point up, is that God is not only going after the wandering, he's going after lost coins. He's going after lost coins, and this is what they represent. Those who aren't conscious of the fact that they are lost. See, what you need to know is that those coins, those 10 coins in ancient times, it actually represented something. It wasn't like you having 5 nickels or, 10 pennies or, well, I said 5, but 10, let's say 10 nickels or 10 pennies in your pocket. It was far more valuable than the coin itself. If I could get that slide, I want you to see this. This is kind of what it looked like. That these women, they would take these coins and they would wear it around their head. And what it represented was their status. And more importantly, if you were a married woman, this represented the fact that you were married. So her losing that one coin could have jeopardized her standing or her place as a married woman. And in those days, if you were to lose that status and her husband said, hey, you lost that, and he's upset, he could legally divorce her for that. Which then would make her unmarriable, which then would make her out there trying to survive on her own, out from underneath the covering of family and being a disgrace. So are you guys seeing how valuable this coin is? She's like, this is part of my identity. I have got to get this thing. So that's why it said that they would turn on a light or get out a candle, and she would move everything and search for it because it was very valuable. But here's the thing about coins, is that coins are inanimate objects. And a coin doesn't know that it's lost. And a coin doesn't really play part of the process of even being found. And this is the interesting thing, is that there are people that you and I know that are completely lost, and they don't even know that they need to be found. I had college professors that were just atheists and that were just, some of the raunchiest people that I've ever known. Vile things coming out of their mouth. And they didn't think that they needed to be saved. And there are some people that are your friends and your family, they're just doing life. They're just doing life. They get up every day, they go to work, they just kind of carry on. And like I said, that is their reality. They're adrift, and they need to be saved. They just don't know it because they're like, well, hey man, that's a nice view. But they don't know that they're headed for danger. They don't know that they need to be saved. And there are a lot of people out there that don't, my friends. And so not only have you been called to go after the wandering, those that you know that are believers, that are just out there kind of doing their thing and just, oh yeah, I kind of do church. It's kind of like a thing, but I'm not really, and kind of in and out, up and down. Yes, we got to go after them. But what about the people in your life that don't know the real danger that they're in? That should their life end today disconnected from God, that they would spend an eternity disconnected from him. What a terrible thought. And I don't say that to scare you, but that is the reality. And I would hope that we would be a church, that we would go after the lost coins, the ones that don't know that there's good news and that there's hope for them. And listen to what it says in Romans 10:14. It says this: but how can they call on him to save them unless they believe in him? So what he's saying is that your faith is what saves you. Your faith is what connects you to God. Your belief in Jesus Christ is what seals the deal for eternity, that will put you in his presence for all of eternity. And he's saying, but how can they call on him, unless they believe in him? So how can they even believe him? It says, and how can they believe in him if they have never heard about him? Isn't this crazy? And it says, and how can they hear about him unless someone tells them? So this is the mission that we all have been put on. Is if there are lost people, just like the lost coin, that don't know that it's lost. The coin doesn't know that it's lost, and many lost people that know that they're lost. How will they find out? How will they know? We need to tell them. We need to go after them. Have you guys noticed how Christianity, we've become very lackadaisical. We've been on our heels. And when you look at the New Testament church, they were very aggressive in the sense of going out and preaching the gospel. Aggressive about going after lost people. Letting them know. Why? Because they were very, very much in tune with what those people's future would be if they didn't reach them. We've got to develop a passion and a fire. Let it be your prayer every single day. God, would you give me a fire for those that are lost, those that don't know that they need you, God? Would you put me in contact with them? Would we cross paths in God? And in that moment, would you give me courage to speak up? Because they matter. I want to share a video with you of one of our friends, one of our family here at church. That I really just believe is very powerful. It's part of his testimony.
Did not grow up in a Christian home, so I first learned about Jesus. I got an invitation at a party I was at back in high school. So I was like, oh yeah, John 3:16, that's my favorite verse in my drunken stupor. I showed up at church that next morning, received Jesus in my life. It was a constant arm wrestling match between me and God. My first real response, just being broken before him and just fully surrendering all that trust I couldn't find a way to before. I never felt any condemnation or judgment from him. It was just complete acceptance. My struggle with God was always hearing these miracles. Not growing up in a Christian home, I had never seen or experienced those miracles. Asking for someone to literally lift my wife from her deathbed was very foreign to me. Having to have that trust when a doctor tells you your wife's going to die. The last person you ever turn to is God, and now that's the only person that you really had. That's how I turned, being broken before him, crying, yelling, doing what we do when we need him. him being there like a perfect father and accepting that response, knowing that there was a perfect parent out there that I could turn to for anything, and that he had his word. If I ever needed advice or anything, I would openly speak to him. I couldn't even accurately put into words the amount of love and peace and comfort instantaneously when you just decide, okay, I need you, and he's right there.
Wow. I love how you said, Jared, you didn't even know that you needed God. And in all places, in a party, man. Gave you an invitation to church, and his destiny was changed because somebody went after a lost coin. You didn't know you were lost, but God found you, and I love that. So I want to go to the next, the last lost person that we want to talk about today. And if we can get to the scripture, I want to share this story in Luke chapter 15. In this story, there were two brothers, and one goes to the father and he says, you know what, I want my inheritance now. Of course, his dad was not dead, so that's kind of an odd question, right? Most of the time, you're at least waiting for your inheritance till your parents pass, but he just goes and says, I want my portion now. Many of you know this story as the prodigal, and he goes and he wastes his money in this foreign land, and as his money's running out, there's this famine that hits the land, so now he's starving. Everything's just going wrong for this guy. And so we pick up in the story because in his mind, he says, you know what? My dad's servants are living better than I'm living right now. And so he makes this pact with himself and this plan that he's going to go home and he's going to beg for mercy and ask his dad to at least let me just be a servant. And so this is what we see in Luke 15:20. It says, and he arose, so speaking of the son, and he came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. Let's continue. It says, and the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And so the third lost group of people that we're looking for is that we're looking for God's lost kids. We're looking for the lost kids out there. Those who know God and those who are disconnected, that they are willingly and rebelliously running from God. Do we have that slide? And so there you go. It's coming up. The lost kids, those who willingly and rebelliously run from God. And there are people that are doing this, and perhaps some of you today, you're sitting in church today, but your heart feels far from him. That somebody drug you here. You didn't feel like being here. You didn't want to be here. And you're struggling with your relationship with God. You're being drawn away by things. Maybe you've been hurt. Maybe you're angry on the inside. And there's this thing inside you that when somebody talks about church, they talk about God, it's like, ugh, like just something stirs in you, and it's not something good. And there's those that are running because you feel the shame, because here you put on a good face, but out there you know that there are things that secretly are going on, and you're really shamed and guilty about it. And so what do? We run from the presence of God. We run from the Father. But the beautiful thing is, in this passage that I just love, is that you see the son, and he starts making his way back. He hatches this plan. And in Luke 15:20, it says this. It says, and he arose, and when he came, it says, but while he was still a long way off. Church, let me just tell you this. In your walk with God, you will experience highs and lows. Sometimes it feels like the tide. You feel like you're close to God, and sometimes you feel like the tide is taking you away. And sometimes that's just the flow of Christianity. It's a little bit like this, and I need to tell you the truth. Because some of you, it's like you feel here, and oh man, I'm tight with God, and how do I stay there? And then you feel that tide pulling you back. And really, in this place is where he's creating a dependence on him. But some of us feel that we're so far here that you need to be ashamed. You need to feel guilt because there's something that you're doing wrong. There's something, but it's just a tide. And I just want to bring wisdom to you that sometimes this is the way it is. But here's the thing is that God is standing on the shore and he sees you. He sees you doing this. And he loves you. And he cares, and he never takes his eye off of you. And it says this, and I just love that. It said that while he was still a long way off, he still saw him. And it says that he saw him and felt compassion. And it says, and he ran and embraced him. What you need to know in this story is that this young boy had gotten so desperate that he was laying in the pig's pen. He was eating the pig slop with the pigs. That's how desperate he was. And the father didn't hesitate, not one moment. Say, you know what, he stinks. Oh, gosh, he's so dirty. Instead of being repulsed, he ran. And church, I want you to know that I want to be a church. I want Hub City to be a church that's marked not by what we're repulsed by, but that we're a whole group of runners. That we run to people that are in their darkest and dirtiest places. That we run to them and that we let them know that they're accepted and they're embraced. That the way that we treat them is a direct reflection of the way that God the Father feels about them. That when we see them at a distance, that we'll take off running because we see them heading and coming home. That we don't say, you know what, like the older brother in the story, he just got what he deserved, man, spent his whole inheritance. And how many of us live like that? You know, so many people that be so judgmental and critical when somebody has taken their first step back home. We need to be willing to run and go over after them. Why? Because people are irreplaceable. You know, there's something that's really interesting in this story is that even though he was out doing his thing, he was still a son. Did you guys catch that? And seeing what religion tells you is that when you make mistakes, that somehow you're disconnected from God. That God is repulsed by you and that you're no longer a son or a daughter. But listen, that's religion because that's all based on works. That's you trying to save yourself. That's you trying to come to God by getting it right. But I want you to know there was only one that ever got it right, and his name was Jesus. And because he got it right, now you've got it right. And even when you're out there and you're lost and you're astray and you're out there in the seas and adrift and doing this, his eye is upon you. And when you take that first turn and you start heading in the right direction, he's coming for you. He's coming for you. And how does he come for you? He comes through his church, his people that welcome people with open arms. Listen, I know that you're strung out. Listen, I know that you were shacking up with somebody last night. Yes, I know all of those things. But you're here today in the house of God. You're here in his presence. You're seeking him. And I'm not going to turn you away at the front door because you don't smell right. You don't look right. You don't talk right. I'm not turning you away. We're going to welcome you in. We're going to embrace you. And you know what? I'll tell you what, even if we get a little stinky, that's okay. Because it's displaying the heart of the Father. And I just love it that when the son comes back and he starts his whole spiel. God, our Father, I know I messed up. And he starts going on this whole thing. The Father just completely ignores him. You know what he says? He says, you guys, he turns to his servants and he tells them this. He says, hey, get out the robe. He turns to him and he says, get out the ring. And put some shoes on this boy. He's got some stinky feet. No, what he's really doing is he's reinstating and reminding him of his true identity. What he's saying is, you know what? Yes, you've been living like that, but I'm going to do something. I'm going to have my servants put this on you to remind you that you are royalty. I'm going to put this on because you may not feel like royalty. You may not feel like you're righteous. You may not feel like you're good enough, but I'm going to tell you what I think about you. And that's why he tells his servants. I love this. He says, said to his servants. The father didn't go and get the robe. The father didn't get the ring. The father didn't get the shoes. Who got the stuff? The servants. And who are we in this story? We are the servants in this story. And so what God has called you and I to do is that when somebody comes home, we begin to remind them of their identity. Yes, you've made some mistakes, but you are not a mistake. Yes, you've messed some stuff up, but you know what? God's going to make a message out of that mess. You know what? Yes, you've gone astray. You've been adrift, but God has called you home. And I'm going to remind you of who you are, that you never stopped being a son. You never stopped being a daughter. Stop trying to work your way to God, but you need to rest in the fact that it was a completed work on the cross. And so, puts that robe of righteousness on you. And he puts that ring. And he puts those shoes. And then he begins this sanctification process where he cleans you from the inside out. So he put all that good stuff on you and you're still feeling a little dirty on the inside, but he's like, hey, we'll work that out. We'll work that out. You don't worry about it. But you stand in faith knowing that he's made you righteous through his son, Jesus Christ. Amen? Even if you don't feel like it, he wants you to know how he feels about you. I have another video I want to share with you as we close out today. If I can get that up.
In a hopeless state where I felt so alone. I felt the loneliest I've ever felt in my life. And I had so many secrets, so much shame, so much guilt. I felt hopeless. And I didn't know that Jesus could put me back together because I always felt so much condemnation. I felt like I was too broken, too far gone, too messed up. There's no way that anybody or anything can fix me. I had believed the lie that my life would be the way it was forever. Fatherly love, the grace, the forgiveness. There was no way that I could not surrender. It was night and day. I just had instant joy. I felt love like I've never felt before. So relieved. If nothing else in my life changed, I had already won. If he could change my life, he could change anybody else, and he can change me. Hell lost another one, and I'm free.
Wow. That's so powerful. So powerful. So God's going after the wanderers. He's going after the rings. He's going after the lost kids. And he's inviting you on a journey to play your part. To go after the ones that are wandering. Little sheep, right back in the mud. Come on, we're going after them. The cool thing is that you could be one of those too and still go after people. Both in the mud. Come on, man, we need help. We got to get up out of this place. The scenery's getting old. And too many of us, we disqualify ourselves because we believe that it's us that changes people, but in reality, it's God that does. It's the God in you that sets people free. So you just keep telling people about him. You just keep working with them. I want to give you one practical thing today. We know who we're going after, but how do we find them? How do we go after them? And it's this, is that you have to see them. You have to see them. You know, as a people, we can be pretty selfish in our everyday lives. And it's almost like you're walking through life and everybody else around you is like they're playing a character in your story. You go to the gas station in the morning and that person that you pay to turn on the pump, they're just playing part of your story. They're playing their part that morning. They were the gas attendant. You drive through that Starbucks drive-through and that person, gives you your coffee and you pay them and there's a transaction that happens. That person's playing a part of a story in your life. Yeah, they were my coffee person. That person that was annoying you, that the light turned green and they were waiting too long and you honked at them 72 times. Did a little speed, machine gun honk. Or some of you just get really into it. So they played the part of the person that ticked you off that day, that stole your peace. Somebody at work took too long to give you a paper that you needed to get a job or a task completed. So they played a role in your day. Are you guys seeing what I'm saying? That many times throughout life, you are encountering people all day long. And many times we don't see them. They're just playing a part in your story. But the reality is that person that made that coffee and gave it to you, they've got anxieties and worries. And they've got troubles and things that they stayed up last night worried about. They got some hard things going on at home too. The gas attendant maybe found out that his wife was given a terminal diagnosis. Maybe that person that was sitting there too long at the light was contemplating how they were going to find a new place to live because they just found out that they were getting evicted. Can you guys see what I'm saying? Is that as we go throughout life, we have a choice to either see them or to ignore them. To see just the everyday, average, normal people that we're having transactions with. Coworkers, neighbors, church members, people on the streets, people in the stores, people at the gas station, people at the ball game. There are people all around us that are wanderers lost coins and lost kids, and we can choose to see them or not. And this is my prayer, is that as we walk throughout our day, that we would take a moment to simply say this: God, would you help me see them with your eyes? God, would you give me your ears so I can hear their cries of desperation? And God, would you help me to feel what you feel for them? See, things change when we begin to take on that mindset, because the power of reaching the one isn't out of some personality-driven determination. Like, I'm gonna go after him. But it's out of a prayer-filled compassion that can only be given from the Father. That's what I leave you with today. We know the target. We know who we need to find. But we need to begin to pray that God would help us see the people around us.